Hi everyone, and welcome back to our videos on the text The China Coin. Now this is part 2 in our 3-part video series on this text. In part 1, we've already taken a look at the plot summary and also just some basic information on the author and the historical and cultural background. And now we have that really solid understanding, we're going to be moving on to examining the text specifically in a lot of detail. So we're going to be looking at the way belonging is seen in these texts and also the different techniques and quotes which you can use in your writing to really show your understanding of this work. So let's take a look at wide reading and textual resources. So once you're familiar with your text and you've really read it thoroughly, it's important that you move on and start using wider textual resources. So this is really a good way of developing your understanding and ensuring that your writing stands out. So you're not just resting on your basic personal understanding or the understanding of your teacher, but you're also looking at the views of a lot of different people and incorporating all of these into your work. So this means that you can use quotes or ideas from critics. And these are a really good way to either introduce new ideas into your essay or alternatively use these to sort of back up ideas and quotes from the text which you've already introduced. It's also important, however, that you don't plagiarize from this material. So while I say that you should really use this wide reading material, you don't want to just be writing that out as your essay. Instead, you want to be using it as quotes and referencing it as the ideas of that critic. And this is a really good way of showing off your sophistication and showing that you've done some research and done some wide reading, and the marker's really going to like that. So if we take a look at a second opinion, this second opinion is actually a novel review written about the China Coin by Suzanne Wilson. So if we really examine the way which Wilson talks about the book, we can use this to have a greater understanding and to sort of support the views which we've already developed. So if we take a look at this quote, so the book gives the readers the opportunity to think whether such books are in fact a successful way of introducing notions of political and cultural upheaval. So basically what the author is saying here is that this book is being really used quite successfully as a medium because it's a children's book, but it's also a book which deals with some very big issues and some very big historical events. So here literature is seen as a medium of historical issues, addressing and spreading controversial themes. So we really see the way in which this book has more to say than just the storyline. It really has these deeper themes which we need to be examining. It's the students who want to change China. It's the youth. What better place to discuss it than in a book for children? So here again, this quote from Suzanne Wilson is really an excellent indication of the way in which the children's book medium is being used really successfully to portray these themes. So the idea is that because the book is about the students, it really should be aimed at the students and at the children who have that chance to really try to change the world. So you get the sense of relationship between the book's content, audience and purpose. And you really get a very clear way in which these 3 distinct factors are interacting and really building up to a solid understanding of this text. The target audience is also belonging to the text itself. Because the text has such a focus on exactly who the audience is, this is going to be really interesting and engaging for the reader. Because when you're reading things that you feel like you belong to and that you can associate with, that's going to be really beneficial for you. This next quote states that one particular achievement is what it says about the process of government, political principles, civil administration and control. What it says about belonging to and taking sides in politics. So here you really again get this sense of belonging directly. So what it means about belonging to, for example, a political party, and also the way in which that sense of belonging is built up through the text itself. So it also has a lot of important multi-level statements in this work about belonging. So this is very influential and challenging as a work, and that's something which you really need to recognize. It's not just any ordinary children's book, it really has a lot of significant messages. So let's take a look at this list of different belonging themes which you could draw from these texts, and then look at each of these themes in detail. So the idea of belonging to culture and tradition, obviously through Leah's Chinese experiences. Finding belonging in an unexpected place. The barriers to belonging and resisting belonging. Belonging to a family. The search for belonging. And finally, the issue of understanding and acceptance as the key to belonging. So let's take a look at all of these factors in a lot of detail. So it's really important when you're analysing themes that you keep 3 sort of main issues in your mind. And as you're doing it, you always think back to those issues and are always sort of thinking about them as you analyse. So firstly, what does the theme mean? So what does it actually mean to understand whatever belonging theme you're looking at? Creating a definition for that theme. Secondly, what are some quotes that support the theme? So really going through your text with a fine-tooth comb and really developing a sophisticated understanding which you can use to back up your main theme idea. And thirdly, how can I focus on belonging? So always making sure you're bringing back your techniques, your quotes, your discussion, always back to that main theme of belonging which you're going to be looking at. So the first theme which we can address now is the issue of belonging to culture and tradition. So initial resistance of culture is really explored through Leah's early experiences in China, and also the fact that she doesn't really want to go to China in the first place because she's really comfortable with her Australian heritage. So she wants to embrace her Australian heritage and ignore her Chinese background. So what she considers to be less important is that Chinese culture. However, she actually really grows to appreciate this culture. For example, you get the tea sharing ceremony. You also get these family meals where the family is sitting around and enjoying their culture together. You also get these sort of greater family connections and also these connections to the ancestors, which are built up through this work. So as the work goes on, this is always increasing for Leah. She also grows to realise the importance of her culture and really wants to be a part of it. So it's not just an issue anymore of wanting to stick with one half of her culture and not the other side. She's really deciding to embrace her Chinese culture and come to an understanding of that culture. So for example, as we discussed earlier, the quote "welcome home," which is said to her on the plane, is really an indication of that shift which she's undergone. So it's not her only home anymore. China has also got that sort of home, that sense of belonging and tradition and family connections and love, which you can associate with the belonging issue. The quote here, "I don't want to go home, I want to stay and help them fight." This is maybe the most obvious example of Leah finding complete belonging in China, to the point where she doesn't even want to go home anymore. She feels such a strong cultural and traditional connection to that Chinese background that she has. So that definite shift between early Leah and then Leah late in the book. So that really sense of personal journey which she's undergone, she's found belonging to a culture and a cause. So let's take a look at this next theme, and this is the idea of finding belonging in an unexpected place. So if we take a look at this quote, we see this is at the very beginning of the work, and it really initially aligns the reader to that fact that Leah didn't understand that culture and wasn't expecting to find belonging in that culture. So Leah thought, "Here I am, about to be sold into slavery in the lost mountains of China. I'm being taken to a village so primitive they file their teeth and eat meat raw." So these sort of stereotypes and this imagery of the very barbaric society, which obviously isn't a true reflection of the culture, is really an indication of the fact that Leah doesn't expect to be finding belonging there. So it also shows her ignorance about this new culture which she's approaching, and also demonstrates that she really doesn't look forward to this visit. She really experiences a lot of hatred towards being forced to go on this trip. So at this point, we see that she's disconnected and alienated by the trip. So we're quite surprised as a reader that she slowly does become more and more interested in the culture and more willing to really participate in it, based on these very early judgments which seem to be incredibly disconnected and alienated. Her misconceptions and assumptions mean that she does not make an early effort to fit in. This is certainly unexpected, that she finds a sense of belonging and self and culture in this land which she'd early sort of judged so harshly and really obviously didn't want to be a part of. So unexpectedly developing this belonging is a surprise for Leah, but a very pleasant surprise and also a very meaningful one for her. So the next theme which we can examine in relation to belonging is the barriers to belonging and the idea that belonging can be resisted. So the language barrier and the issue of communication are really important throughout this work. So the fact that Leah can't speak Cantonese when she arrives in the city and in the village is really a very good example of the fact that she just doesn't fit in and she really doesn't feel like she will ever belong because of these very clear barriers which are making it hard for her to find that sense of belonging. So these sort of strange customs which she's resisting and that she doesn't really want to appreciate because she doesn't understand them. These are all the barriers for Leah finding belonging. For her, it's almost like a wall has been built up and she just isn't understanding all these different elements and that she's being blocked out of this culture because it's so foreign to her. So if we take a look at this quote, "The restaurant was a hole in the corner of a grey building. A grimy fish tank and a closed basket reduced the entrance to a totter and a hop." So this sort of imagery in this quote is extremely powerful. It's painting a very sort of disturbing picture of this place which Leah doesn't understand, which she doesn't like, which seems dirty and foreign and unfamiliar. And it's really creating that sense that Leah isn't going to find belonging here because it's so confusing for her. This next idea of belonging to a family is also one of the most important belonging themes in the work. So Leah initially feels no connection with her mother's side of the family, and she doesn't really share that name that they have, and so therefore feels like on a deeper level she's not really part of that family and she's not really part of that traditional family culture which exists in China. So, however, her sense of belonging grows to her family and ancestors as she develops a more solid understanding of her culture and of what's happening around her. She develops respect for her elders and a greater sense of family unity develops. So this quote, "For the first time, Leah was thinking of Joan's family as her family. Joan's grandmother was her great-grandfather, and Swallow's grandfather was her great-uncle, if she wanted it that way." So you have that reference there to Joan, who is obviously her mother, and the way in which Joan's family now also feels like Leah's family. So while she initially felt really disconnected and not part of that culture, she now really feels those strong family ties and feels that sense of unity to them. She also makes the choice to belong to this new family and really is making an effort to develop ties. So it's not just a matter anymore of being complacent and sitting back, but she's really obviously trying to make an effort to speak up, to get people to in her family to enjoy her company and to accept her. This is also seen in her relationship with Kay through that very strong development of relationship which they develop as the book goes on. So the search for belonging is also a key theme in this text. So the coin really becomes a ubiquitous symbol and a motif for the journey towards belonging. It's sort of that token which represents the way in which they can progress, the reason that they're even on this trip. It really represents a lot about the search and the journey for them. So this is representative of struggles, notions of death, family, and also ancestry. So it's really a symbol and a multi-level symbol for a lot of different aspects. The coin is also the key to culture and finding connections with the people around Leah. So the coin is almost a token and it's a symbol for the potential for Leah to find these greater family connections and these greater ties not only to her family but also her culture. If you take a look at this quote, But this coin, this strange piece of metal, I do not know this coin, and I do not know its story. I am sorry. So this voice here is really stating the fact that this coin is a mystery, that no one really knows what it is or what it represents. So really the whole sense of this novel becomes this mystery which aims to finally solve this family problem about what this coin is and what it represents. So the journey towards belonging, towards finding answers and accepting those answers. The mystery of the coin is obviously that driving force in their journey. And it's obviously leading to belonging through the knowledge that it brings about their family history, taking them back to their father's village, for example, and really leading them together as a family. So the final theme to do with belonging in this text is the concept of understanding and acceptance as the key to belonging. So the contrasting relationships between Leah and Joan are really a good indication of this theme throughout the work. So for example, you get this quote here by Leah. "I didn't ask to come, it's your rotten china." Leah struck Joan's arm away. So really that indication there early on that Leah doesn't want anything to do with this country, with this trip. She even strikes Joan's hand away. So she's using sort of almost physical violence to get out of this trip and to express her lack of belonging and her hatred and her lack of understanding and acceptance for this land. However, we then move on to the opposing, the contrast, which states, "Joan put her free arm around Leah and she crushed the girl into her side." So we're moving there from that hostility, that hatred, that violence, to this very sort of kind motherly gesture. It's a symbol of understanding and their improved relationship. So no longer does Leah not accept China, but she's really growing to love it, to understand it, and to appreciate it. So belonging can easily be traced through that theme of acceptance as the key to forming that really strong sense of belonging. So this is the end of part 2 of our 3-part video. In this video, we've really examined the concepts of belonging in depth. And if you join us in just a second, in the 3rd part, we'll be looking at textual detail. So how you can use specific quotes and examples from the text to improve your understanding.